Thank you very much. So indeed, I'm going to get to the details in application for this particular award, but I'm going to start with essentially contextualizing what networks mean right now, as this session is called. It's a matter of what happens when global pause means a global network. And so if we take as a point of departure what happened quite recently, there were a lot of people, young people, passionate, ambitious people in the streets as they started to close down. They were protesting, they were asking, demanding a future that they believed would not become a reality if there wouldn't be substantial changes made to our current trajectories. Books were published in 2019 calling it an uprising. The contagiousness of passion and idea was emphasized. But as it happened, as we're all experiencing, a virus turned out to be more contagious yet, or rather, at least in the short term. Those demonstrations in their physical form that have been the staple to move sympathies, to shift priorities, and ultimately sway legislators so that the rules in place and the national monopoly of violence backing those rules finally come to support and reflect a gradually upgraded, updated agenda. That's the process that we have been relying on to shift society's structures and the outcomes our collective efforts produce. But that, along with so much other things, have been put on pause. However, the thoughts, the belief, the ambition among those who were just starting to rise, that remains and shifts. As we are in our lockdowns, scrolling, listening, watching, observing, as systems that have been said to be, if not the best, then surely the least horrible alternatives, fail utterly when it comes to guaranteeing that thing that all people have in common, which is, of course, the longing for a safe tomorrow. We are watching national systems tackle a global problem with many times quite distinct local approaches. A system turning a global event into very regional experiences. Now, fascist regimes of the past have taught us a lot of interesting lessons about group psychology and about obedience. The general understanding being that a population can be roughly divided into the 20% who obey easily, the 20 who will question and resist even in the face of dire consequences, and the remaining 60 that seem to be able to be swayed to go in either direction, depending on the circumstances and the narratives at hand. And this is a moment where 100% of us are asked or made to obey rules and recommendations that mean giving up, if not only what we like and love, but in many cases, the activities we depend on for our livelihood. We're asked to do it for each other, for the sake of reason, for the greater good, but we're also seeing how contradictory the recommendations are from state to state, and sometimes from day to day. We are observing how no leader really knows enough to make truly informed assessments. And so for all the established authorities that have been proven wrong so far, for example, by initially taking COVID-19 far too lightly, many more leaders and institutions, global as well as national and regional, will have been proven undeniably wrong when all of this is over. So whether you're a part of the 20% prone to question or obeying, or the more undecisive majority, this is a brutal exercise in renegotiating trust. That is not only true for the people who paused in their presence demonstrating in the streets. It is also something for every person to ask right now. Who will we end up trusting? Who will come out on top as an authority? How will we feel about authorities at all, be it in relation to economic policies, epidemiology, or global governance of global risks? This is where networks become so key. Networks, as we know, can be built on many foundations. By those resting on shared values, goals, and mutual respect, rather than, say, citizenship arbitrarily assigned by the lottery of birth. But these deliberate networks of association, they are particularly interesting in times like these, where local media generally try to echo the policies and narratives presented by regional leaderships. Having global networks where you can share and compare experiences, strategies, and learn from one another, be it regarding how to 3D print a visor, handle the mental and economic struggles of our new situation, or help lobby alternative systems for distributing surplus. It is the networks that really interesting things are happening right now. It is in the abundant peer-to-peer exchanges of like and different-minded people that new alliances become the hotbed for cultivating new narratives of value. Because when we get less sure of what level of trust to extend to which authority, the relationships between people we call, if not our friends, then at least our peers, whose track record we can see unfold online, that can be both soothing and action-inspiring in its effects. And so it's with those insights I'm very proud to share my belonging and experience in being part of a network that right now is filled with people who are acting just like that. People who can both think critically and act constructively, are turning, for me at least, this quarantine into not a pause, but a fast forward. A fast forward to make many initiatives that have been advocated relevant, and to pivot that status quo to something more reasonable, long-termist, and just. The particular network that I want to share more about today fit those criteria with flying colors, and is one that is essentially curated and hosted in a way by the School of International Futures. And the way it is curated to a large extent is through the Next Generation Foresight Practitioner Award. And so this is a prize that aims to find people who have that constructive will to co-create the future by devotion to the practice of foresight. The School of International Futures support awardees to essentially give us more options apart from protesting, other ways of being influential when it comes to what the future ends up looking like. And so currently I am one of 30 fellows from the 2019 cohort, or I'm sorry, there are 15 from 2019. And that we in turn belong to a larger group of some 100 members representing 53 countries. And so in the group that I was part of last year, the winners were skilled practitioners from India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Mexico, Romania, Kazakhstan, Nigeria, and Brazil, but also others. And they were awarded in different categories. Foresight is still a field prioritizing Western thinkers and Western perspectives in a disproportionate and very risky way, which is a part of the curation of this network, and that this network essentially tries to address actively. It is sometimes said that the quality of the thinking in a group is linked to the diversity of the perspectives in it. Now, this might not be true for everything, but in terms of foresight, the value of many generations, geographic and cultural contexts being present is pivotal to pick up crucial signals, which might appear weak in one context, but are heard loud and clear in others. All the awardees were brought together in Brussels last fall. And as inspiring as the conversations were then and to be a part of, I have to say that it is now, in the face of what in many ways is a discombobulating crisis. This is where the true value of these kinds of groups shines through and shines bright. The response in the cohort I belonged to was quite immediate. First, thought pieces came out contextualizing the ongoing crisis. And then in the light, or rather shadow, of current crisis, Charlie Warwick, Erika Ball, and Oske Aidan An, all from the network, started a curation of something extremely inspirational called the Future Manifesto, which will be released in its first iteration in 2020, where foresight practitioners from around the globe are describing concrete positive scenarios of what the world could look like in 2050 in their respective regions. So essentially, it's an analogy of stories. And the idea with it is to encourage public and private actors to consider what role each can play in bringing these scenarios about. The next stage of the process is to make it into a digital resource that can continue to grow, including more inspirational pieces from an increasing number of territories and foresight practitioners around the world. And another project that has also just emerged in the last months is spearheaded by Shakil Ahmed, also from the 2019 cohort, who's been co-creating a database of how people across the world right now are handling the challenges, existential, mental health related, medical and financial, with focus on community organization. In the network, fellows are also contributing to Edward Seperia's Coronavirus Tech Handbook, which, built on wiki principles of co-creation, is becoming an invaluable resource to navigate this crisis. It's a clear case of authority and trust emerging directly from utility. Furthermore, and also from the network, is Leah Saidi, who will be presenting on Saturday and who has developed scenarios, particularly in response to COVID-19. And personally, together with Julian Lair, I'm in the last stage of finalizing a book that was already coming, but is now being COVID contextualized. It's on the future of governance, where we essentially walk through the existing and emerging tools for power and provide toolkits for anyone considering what the mechanisms are to organize a society, be it a matter of building new structures or re-engineering what is already in place. At the School of International Futures, you can follow the projects and awardees in these efforts and see them evolve, spread, and also invite others to join them, to join forces, because forces must join. Trust is no negligible thing in a society that is built so completely on enough people believing with enough intensity in the constructions that we call our civilization. The more fragile, the more challenged the existing narratives and hierarchies become, the more important the alternative stories and systems for them to spread and become known. And so, as some hierarchies are looking dauntingly fragile right now, the peer-to-peer networks continue to showcase another model, one where authority isn't acquired by appointment, election, or personal wealth creation, as much as by continuous contribution to a community. For this particular network, however, there is one aspect of appointment. There is a due process to get in, so to speak, and that is next practitioner award, essentially called the Joseph Jaworski's Next Generation Foresight Practitioner Award of 2020. And so the application to be a part of this network is open right now. And you can apply until the 31st of May this year. And there is a monetary award tied to it as well, if you for some reason are an innovator in foresight who need further motivation to want to be a part. It's $15,000, but you also get to attend this strategic foresight retreat and mentoring and continued support in your foresight future creating efforts. This year also has 2 new prizes, and they are designed at 18 to 25-year-olds. And there the award is $5,000 in walkabout prizes. But I have to say that the most powerful aspect in becoming a part of this community, where entry is granted not based on where you happen to be born, but on your capacity and desire to envision futures and be a part of creating them. Because as so many of us, as literally billions, will be by interest and by force watched will be stuck essentially watching the systems and leaders that currently both fail and will come out prospering. We will see all that unfold in the months, in the year to come. And we will need help to make sense of that together with others. And although some of us have been digital citizens since birth, essentially, we have yet to find the digital equivalent to street protests, to coming together in that sense, but online. However, now, in lack of places where we can meet up in person, in those crowds that we have relied on for so long, and with so much time to think and innovate, perhaps during this pause, we finally will find how to do it, how to really make use of networks and organize in a profound way in our digital realities. And so in this currently extremely unclear world, one of the few things that appear certain is that the way forward goes through the power in numbers, organizing, sharing, linking up, and building trust, one physical, distant relationship at the time. Thank you very much. I am more than happy to take any questions, but I would also very much like to show you the website of the International Futures, which you can find here on, I hope you see my screen here, on soif.org.uk. And here you can read about the School of International Futures, and under initiatives, you can find the fellows, and you can read about the respective, what everyone's doing right now. And you can also find the application process to be a part of the next cohort, which essentially means becoming a part of the network with all the previous awardees as well. Are there any questions at this point? So I'm not seeing any questions yet. I would be very interested to see if there are, let's see, I'm a total novice in this area, but I'm interested to be involved. Any ideas? Well, essentially, what you do is you apply with what you are currently doing. And if you have an idea for what you would like to do, that is also possible. And perhaps if you don't know yourself or haven't been involved in the foresight community for long, there might be other people that you can team up with and potentially also submit something as a group. There, I have 2 questions coming in. Great. Okay, thank you so much for the questions. The first one is from Marcella Sabino. What do you see as some of the most inspiring and innovating initiatives coming out of this crisis? Well, I think that what is happening right now, so just to make a distinction, like I will answer these questions from me as a person that is a part of this network, but will not be representing the entire network as I answer these questions. Classic disclaimer. I would say that one of the most inspiring things that we're seeing right now relates to universal basic income. And the momentum for that moment has been strong for a long time. But right now, with Spain seemingly becoming the first country to roll it out on a larger in a larger program, is extremely interesting, because it's something that has been discussed for literally hundreds of years, and then because of automation, it's been seen as a way to potentially get us from the system where we are so reliant on the current model for wage labor to essentially make a living. But this is certainly fast-tracking that process very much. So that's extremely interesting. The second thing I would say is self-sufficiency, people understanding how dependent we are on long supply chains, and a lot of essentially practices where we become more able to fulfill our own needs, be it through vertical gardens and urban farming or 3D printers, but it can also be solar cells and ways of thinking about where we're getting what we need to survive, essentially, who we are dependent on, because that becomes clear when chains break down, and clearly reflected in how people have been acting in supermarkets and stockpiling and so on. Second question from Olga Gonzalez. Can you share a couple of ideas that you have found creative that are not protests to boost change? Yeah, I think there I would love to go back to the amazing resource that is the coronavirustechhandbook.com. And that is this resource of essentially anything from how to work at home to how to where to find funding for your projects right now. And it's this collaborative document. So essentially it's the kind of document that so many of us have become very used to working on in our professional lives. But to see this, it's a Joe Docs. It's like an alternative to Google Docs, works very similarly, but is an open source project, I believe. And to see how that has evolved, like a static document, but that isn't static at all. It's to see that evolve, I would say, is actually a kind of creative alternative to a protest, but it's just so focused on coming up with constructive ideas rather than simply expressing what you don't want or what you want a lot of. It's more granular and impressively capable of maintaining complexity and cultivating complexity. So it's getting, this entire tech handbook is getting deeper and deeper and deeper with links, essentially like a tiny little wiki. And I would say in a way a wiki is a kind of protest or a kind of way of describing the world, which is what demonstrations also aim at doing. But the big difference is, of course, how do policymakers respond to these efforts? Because we know when it comes to demonstrations that if you have a large enough crowd and that gets large enough traction in the media, there is the trajectory there to change and to sway narratives and ultimately change legislation. But can that be done through a document? Can a document have those kind of effects? And so I'm following with great interest how that tech handbook is making its more and more viral media rounds, how that's being picked up and written about. And sure, it's not producing as powerful images as a huge crowd in a square or something like that. But I really think that what's actually being cultivated there is at least as interesting. The question is, can we have movements that don't revolve around powerful images of people? And I think then the question is, what will be the images we will use instead? And this might be an unsuspected answer there, but another, to go back to Olga's question, a couple of ideas that are creative, that are not protests to boost change. I will have to say memes. Memes right now are becoming a sort of expression to describe the world, which, as I think we all know, is one of the most powerful ways of having power. Really, who gets to tell the story of the world? And right now we're starting to tell it to each other in the form of memes, and I think that's very interesting and should be taken very seriously. It was not coincidental that when Mike Bloomberg very late in the game tried to run for office in the US, he invested heavily in memes, and then I think for many reasons that still that campaign had so many other weaknesses, but the fact that when you're trying to enter a game really late, he just went all in on memes is significant. So the question is, what do we do with these memes? We are making each other sort of empathizing and feeling connected through them, and that might be enough. But what would the equivalent be to memes? What would a meme look like that would be the equivalent to a Fridays for Future protest, for example? Okay, so now we have another question from Manal Abtve. Is there requirements in terms of fields that the School of International Futures support? What initiatives do you think are most constructive to support intergenerational change? That is an excellent question as well. Requirements in terms of fields. So I can speak as to what was awarded last year, which was quite a range of initiatives that were focused on gender, that were focused on climate, that were focused on governance, that were focused on models for making foresight more inclusive and diverse, and really emphasizing how do we get perspectives that are very key but all too often overlooked or not included, how do we get them featured? And so that's quite a wide range, and there was also quite a spread when it came to the level that the awardees had been doing foresight work. Some had done it very regionally in spaces that usually don't have a foresight practice tradition, and some had done it in more the usual suspect contexts. So it's quite wide. So it's more about the quality of the work than the exact field, as long as it's connected to either shaping or disruptive futures. The second part of this question, what initiatives you think are the most constructive to support intergenerational change? I can speak for myself again. So this might not be guiding or helpful when it comes to winning the award or being included in the network. But what I would say is a big part of intergenerational change, as cliche as the word might sound, is dialoguing. Like what are the spaces where people that have quite different outlooks can come together and exchange in a way that is respectful and that isn't tokenized. It's not tokenizing people who usually wouldn't be included, but it's a real listening exercise. And the second part, I think it sort of builds on the first, but that is facilitators. Facilitators, I think, are very often underlooked as this amazing source for getting further than people can when they're discussing without the facilitator. So the more diverse a group is, I think the bigger the need for facilitators to make a conversation a real learning experience. And I think it's very fascinating how many protocols we have in our governance systems that have to do with that we need to listen to a certain group, or we have to take a certain group into account. But how we're listening, or how we are reading a report, or how we're digesting the information, we're not given that much help, or leaders aren't given that much help in how to do that. So I would in general say, both when it comes to intergenerational and any kind of different groups that are trying to find a common path, really utilizing both facilitation techniques. And I would also say transitional justice has so many protocols and practices that we could learn from, not only in times that follow up on a genocide or deeply horrid events, but like a precautionary measure or as a preemptive measure to make sure that we don't end up in situations that are that desperate and brutal. Any other questions? Any links that you would want me to share? I'm going to share with you the tech handbook, of course, where you can apply, and the the School of International Futures. Is there anything else that I've mentioned that you would like to learn more about? I'll wait a couple of minutes. Let's see. Yes, the handbook. Great. Well, thank you so much for listening. And I really, as I said, like the power of networks right now, I think, are becoming something so much more than it used to be, because where it could be a complement to an existing system, I think in many cases we're seeing that we can rely a lot on the trusted networks that are created from utility and from contribution and so on. And having something we can trust, I think, is a necessity for pretty much every human. So yeah, I really would love for the ones of you who feel that this is a call for you to be to join in. Let's see, this might sound basic. How to form part of the network. This is from Javier Mercado. Would you please elaborate what that means? How to be a part of the network? Well, you become a part of the next generation foresight practitioner, by essentially applying to this award. That's the way in. Now I got another question, so I'll stay on as long as new questions emerge. How about academic futurists? Can they win the JJ Foresight Practitioner Award? Is the expected contribution only practical or also scholarly? It can absolutely be scholarly. I would say a majority of the awardees come from academia. So definitely, I'm sorry if I haven't been clear about that. I would say that being a practitioner when it comes to foresight, at least in my understanding, can definitely be that you are a practitioner within academia. So the answer is simply yes, you can, and I hope if you feel called will apply. Let's see, I think we have another one. We have Maximo Reyes from Lima, Peru. Hello, Maximo. Is there a question in there as well? Oh, here, I will also see, I don't know if you have all seen, but there is a Q&A and then there is the chat. And so I'm reading from the Q&A, but I'll look for the chat to see if there is anything else. What is the governance approach of the School of International Futures about the 2030 agenda in a pandemic context? So I don't feel qualified to answer that, but I would love to. So this is from Sorelli Calixto. What I can do is I'll take your name and see if I can find a way to reach out to you afterwards so that you can get a response from those who work at the School of International Futures. Because I'm also not entirely sure if you mean what they believe in terms of governance for pandemic, what's a valid governance response to pandemics should be as it relates to 2030, or if it's about the internal governance of the School of International Futures. So if you would clarify and send your email to me privately, I'll follow up with you. Yes, I believe that is it.